Welcome, folks, to a new brand spanking episode of Let's Talk Common Sense with me, Mike Omni. It's 2021. A new year's upon us. Now, this is already different because we're working remotely and the podcast now, we're going to be doing it remotely. Now, this gives us access to some great guests, which you're in for with this season. But as you know, just after Christmas, large parts of England are all moving into Tier 4, including Manchester, where we're currently based. I'm in my house. But you know what? I'm kind of looking forward to having interesting discussions with people from my house. So we've reached out to a number of really interesting people. And over the next few weeks or so, we're going to be having some great conversations. Now, there's so much to discuss. Of course, we know that today, the 1st of January, which is when we're recording this podcast, we enter a new era with the EU. After 3 years, 5, if you count referendum, of debating, of back and forths, we finally left the European Union. Although some would say, did we really leave? Because Northern Ireland still has different conditions. And of course, we're still in this little brief period where we're negotiating what's going to happen with fishing and stuff like that. But I don't want to get too into that so fast. This is a special episode. I'm in my hoodie, I'm at home, and I'm joined by a great guest. And we're going to just talk about some of the exciting things we can look forward to in 2021. This is a big year. Lots is happening. So I don't want to do this alone. So let's welcome. Oh, by the way, I forgot all the kind of important stuff. Of course, also subscribe if you haven't subscribed. This podcast is brought to you by the Common Sense Network, where we create spaces for people who disagree to come together and learn from each other. But with that done, I welcome my guest for this wonderful episode. It's none other than Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Close enough. That will do.
Did I not get it right?
You almost got it right. It's okay. It's fine.
No, it's not fine because it happens all the time where people just get my name wrong. So for me, and also for the people listening, how do we actually pronounce your name?
So the N is actually silent in my name. So it's actually Afsha is how you pronounce it. Yeah. It's an A with a U sound underneath it. There's Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Yeah, it's a Lodi rather than Lodhi. Low.
Okay. Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Lodhi, yeah.
Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Yeah. Afsha.
Afshan D'souza-Lodhi.
Yeah, great. Do you know what's really interesting? I've been on a few Clubhouse rooms, and they get my name right the first time, and it's just like it's beautiful. It's absolutely
really. They get the silent N the first time.
They will get because I put AF-SHA in my bio, and they read it and they kind of go, "Oh, Afsha, great."
Yeah. Well, to be fair, if you have a silent part of your name, and I just met you, how am I gonna know unless you kind of tell me?
Sorry, do you not Google and research everyone before you meet them?
No, I don't Google names that frequently have a silent part. Oh, but okay. I'm glad to be corrected, and I think you've helped people. Well, should we start with an introduction, Afsha? Because you've been on here before. You remember the Common Sense Network, so some people will be familiar with you. But for folks who are listening for the first time, what do you do? Who is Afsha? I mean, you have books behind you.
I have. Just
obviously, it's the Zoom thing to do, right? You know, you have books behind you. People go, she must be really learned. Now, you are actually learned, aren't you? Tell us a bit about you.
Well, I've been doing a lot of panels, a lot of literary festivals, UK based and also international, and having the books in the background. This side, sorry, the mirroring is really weird on this. It's really useful, so people can kind of go, you know, what books have you written this year? And I launched 2 books, guys. 2 of them this year during a pandemic, and all the restrictions, all the lockdowns. Haven't done a single live gig with them, a sort of like face-to-face gig with them. But yeah, I'm a poet and playwright, currently working on a couple of really interesting projects, some TV stuff, some theatre stuff coming out, and fingers crossed, a collection of short stories in the next couple of years.
Amazing. How did you launch a book in the middle of a pandemic? How did that go? Did you? Because I mean, I'm serious. Because obviously you couldn't have events. We had to cancel the event. You know, it's been really hell for like events and stuff like that, hasn't it?
I struggle with Zoom. I get like quite a bit of Zoom fatigue. So I didn't, and I haven't watched a lot of literature or any events really online. So I didn't want to put anybody else through that. I felt a bit mean, kind of forcing my friends, my family, people that that love me to to sit through and watch an hour or 45-minute long version of just me talking to them. So I was like, all right, allow that. What else can I do? So I created a book launch in a box, which is like a box that you can unpack yourself, and sort of like, so it has in there like a drink, and you've got like sweets, something to eat, something to smell. You've got incense. You've got like some poetry workshop bits in there. You've got the book, and then you've got these amazing postcards that illustrators designed for me, and then the actual collection as well. And the idea is that you can do that book launch over a day, over an hour, over a month, over a week, however long you want. And I've just launched the winter edition of that, which is a little dose of summer, because we're all a bit cold and a bit bored of lockdown. So if you are interested in getting a winter edition of the Regarding Desire book event, then just check out my website. Shameless plug.
Superb. No, it's fine. I mean, I've read the book, or the collection of poetry. I've looked at it, and yeah, it's brilliant. So I think folks definitely should take a look at it. Last year was hard, and obviously you didn't let that stop you. It was hard for most people. I think when you said Zoom fatigue, you're speaking for a lot of people there who last year was just kind of hell for. Now we thought we'd made it out with the announcement of a vaccine, but with this new mutant strain, there's about 3 different. Well, apparently, actually, the virus mutates all the time. So there's been 23 altogether, but there's been 2 new strains that are that pass about 70% more than before. 70% more than before. So everyone's panicking. There's a new mutant strain apparently in Nigeria. One's come from South Africa. So it seems like COVID is just kind of, it's not going away, as it were. So right now we're in lockdown. That's why we're doing this odd kind of video thing where normally we'll be sat opposite each other. So I guess what I thought we would do, seeing as this is a special episode after all, is just kick back, relax, and talk about some of the exciting things or some of the interesting things that's happening this year. Now, let's just get Brexit out of the way, because I know people are like, well, what about Brexit? This year, today even, we've entered a new era of relationship with the EU. We are now officially out. How does it feel to be out of the European Union, Afshan?
Wow, that's such a loaded question, Mike.
Well, you're a Remainer, right?
Yeah, I'm a Remainer, but I feel like I've been waiting for this moment, and didn't think that it would come since 2016, since we voted. So I'm like, it's like 5 years later that we're hearing that we're actually leaving, and we've left, and that was it. We're done now, and we still have no idea what that means for anything. So we know that importing and exporting taxes have increased. We've got people that voted to leave the EU, farmers particularly, that are kind of going, oh no, we didn't realize that being out of the European Union means that we'd actually like leave the European Union and wouldn't have any access to any of like the importing or the rights that come with that. So they're now backtracking and kind of going, oh, this Brexit thing's done us really bad. Most notably, there was a semi-viral video of an eel farmer who basically 3 times a week sends eels to, I think it's Germany. And he was like, well, that's it now. That's my last shipment done, because in the new year, we won't be able to send them out because of the changes in laws and the amount of shipping costs and importing and exporting sort of charges and fees that you have to pay. So people in mainland Europe aren't going to be buying stuff from us because it's more expensive. So we've kind of done ourselves a little bit dirty by, we can't buy anything from outside of the UK, and nobody wants to buy anything from us anywhere. They're just the little petulant little child that gets told by the parents to, sit in the corner because you're not getting dessert. And
well, we've agreed a trade deal which would allow for no tariffs. Yeah, well, we have. It's been ratified. I mean, I think it should get. I think it's gotten royal assent because it came into law 1 a.m. last night. So there aren't tariffs on hundreds of produce and products. So I don't know much about eel farming, so I can't speak much to that. But it's interesting though, because a part of me thinks what happens with Remainers like yourself. Like I had Femi Sorry on Twitter on this podcast. I think he was the last episode we had just before Christmas. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, what's your prescription then for the UK? What's going to happen in 2021? And he was, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said, what's this effect? Like, it's over. We're just going to jump off a cliff and slowly decline. And I thought, well, I'm not sure. Like, that's how I see 2021 going. Are you saying live on this podcast that what's going to happen over 2021 is the UK is just going to slowly decline and more people won't be able to buy anything, and we're going to be the petulant child? I mean, that seems like a very negative way to think about our future.
No, but I guess it is negative, but that's what's happened. Is you can't spin a positive from something so bad. Like we're losing, our passport has lost so much value because of Brexit, because of the.
What is my value? Like monetary value, or what do you mean?
No, I don't mean monetary value. I mean like the way that we can't travel as much freely within Europe. The fact that as soon as COVID hit, the first thing they did was not even as soon as COVID hit, as soon as Brexit from the 1st of January, if you're living in no UK person can travel to European countries, mainland, other countries in the EU, and that's because we've left the European Union. And there's issues with.
You can still travel. I'm not sure that. I don't think that's totally true.
You can't work in the same way that you used to. I've got friends that live in Spain that do poetry in Spain, then do poetry in the UK, and they're unable to work there in the same way. They have to then apply for a green card or apply for a visa to live and work in that country in a separate way to how they would have to do in the UK. And I think it's things like that then really, personally, they don't affect me because I'm not somebody who wants to live in Spain or Germany, for example, and work. But there are a lot of my friends that do. That it just means that if I take a show and tour it, the touring process becomes a lot harder. So the visa cost for everyone, the higher visa costs, for example, they add on. The equipment transfer fees, they add on. And I think that once, and it's not just that we will have to pay those fees, it's that then I have to do the admin. So if I want to do a Europe tour, I'd have to pay the admin for each and every country separately. There isn't like it'd be so magical if we could just go, I'm going to go to the to Europe and just have one visa and then travel. But that's exactly what the EU was. And we were like, nah, mate, we're all right. So
yeah, but I mean, we've left the EU. I mean, you're basically saying, because it sounds like what you're saying is like a really bad thing, but you're basically saying we're gonna have to treat countries like the way we treat other countries, which for me is kind of that's kind of how you treat countries. You're not in.
There's no benefit anymore to living in the UK, and as it was in the way that they used to be. Like 5 years.
There's no benefit to living in the UK at all anymore.
No. In the same way as they used to be 5 years ago. The fact is that you could come to the UK, you could live here, you could, have a family, which is what my parents did however many years ago. The idea was, the whole of Europe is open to us because we're part of the EU, we're part of this entire network that we can just on a holiday and kind of go, got a free weekend, let's go to Amsterdam. Or, if we want to pick up and leave from the UK because the racism's getting a bit too bad, we can go to another European country because they're so much better.
And experience racism, experience a different type of racism. Well, here's what I want a kind of French racism.
Oh my God, please! I do love some French racism.
Yeah. Just a slightly different flavor. Yeah. No, but I mean, people should be aware because I'm actually meant to be going to Spain at the end of this week. Well, the Canary Islands, not Spain, and on some of the stuff you said, the current restrictions we have on travel now is more because of COVID rather than Brexit. Of course, you can't retire and work in the UK as normal. Sorry, in the EU as normal if you're from the UK, because of course, it's a different country now. Spain is a separate sovereign country that we're not in a political or an economic union with. So things have changed. However, you can still travel to Spain. I mean, right now, because of COVID, you can only travel for essential travel, as it were. Or if you're a Spanish national, you're trying to get back to the UK, that's another reason as well. But you can't go for the reasons you used to go before, which is just kind of for fun, for leisure. But that will change. What we're hearing is tomorrow, so this podcast will come out on Monday, so January the 5th is when some of the rules will change about when you can travel to Europe or not. That is a real difference for young people who are global citizens normally, right? I literally traveled. I'm in Europe for the most part multiple times a year, every year. So that will be a bit different now that things have changed a little bit. But I think it's in the best interest of the EU and the UK to have frictionless travel. And I do think that will be the case for the most part because it benefits nobody to make life difficult for EU nationals to come here and vice versa. Living is slightly different, but I think travel for the most part is quite simple. I mean, even America, to travel to America, you just all you have to do is fill out a ESTA visa, I believe, which pretty much the next day you get, and then you can travel. It's frictionless for the most part. It's not this newly difficult thing. So what I want to do as well is so we filled our Brexit quota, because I know Brexit's super interesting, but for the listeners and the viewers, I reckon we put Brexit aside and talk about some of the exciting things happening this year. So what's happening this year, Afshan, that you're kind of excited about, that you think is going to be interesting, that isn't going to be the UK? Remainers do this. The UK is just destined to fail. We're going to jump off a cliff and we'll never be worth anything ever again. Not saying you're saying this, but if I go on Twitter and type in Brexit, all I see is, oh, we've shot ourselves in the foot. We're going to slowly bleed and die. I'm like, well. Let's talk about other things that's happening that you're excited about.
Well, I mean, if we, it's really hard because there's so many different kind of variants of what's happening. So we've got like not just COVID, but we've got also Brexit on top of that, and then like whether this means that we'll change the way that we're moving in the future, and change the way that we travel. So Walt Disney's 50th anniversary is this year, and I think it'd been great to take kids there, but also will we be able to travel? Who knows?
I love the fact Walt Disney up, because so of all the exciting things happening this year, is Walt Disney's birthday the one you thought, do
you know what? I just figured there'd be a lot of discounts and I'd be able to take my kids, my hypothetical kids, to do
arguing for kids you don't have. Is that what you're now doing?
Or just it's manifest, right? This thing that you manifest and then it comes, something like that. I don't know. Saw it on TikTok. But I think generally the most exciting thing for me is Joe Biden's inauguration. I've been waiting on going to the US because of Donald Trump, and I've wanted to go. I wanted to go like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and then kind of like delayed, and then when I decided that I would go and do my PhD there, Donald Trump came into power, and I was like, oh great, that's amazing, because now I can't do anything. And we'd also decided in the same year that we'd do Brexit. So suddenly my desire to go to the US and to like work or to do my PhD or to live there or whatever was completely squashed. So Joe Biden coming in, I mean, he's not. I don't like him. No, let me rephrase that. Him and Kamala Harris are way better than Donald Trump, but they still have lots of issues, and that's okay. But it does mean that as a brown, person who comes across as Muslim often, it's really hard for me to travel to places like the US, particularly after I've written a lot of quite anti, or if I've written, comedic plays about terrorism, for example. It doesn't really put me in a good light to be able to travel to the US, or hasn't done in the past. So I think I'm hoping that, with Biden coming in and it being not as anti-Muslim or anti-brown, that I'll be able to travel, and that fear will go.
It's odd. I was actually talking to a friend about this, about the kind of, we all know that Joe Biden is going to lower the political temperature. That's one big thing that's going to happen. But I guess what we haven't quite decided is how low that temperature will get. Will it get so low that people just don't care about politics anymore? They're just not interested. People are going to switch off, as it were. Because one thing that Trump's been good for is like the news business, right? So I guess that's one of the fears is it going to get to a level now where people...
So you're basically saying that Joe Biden's going to come in and news networks won't have anything to do because there's not going to be like a silly thing to report anymore. You mean you can actually report on politics?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of it's a kind of chicken and egg thing, isn't it? Because it in an odd way, I'm interested in current affairs, right? So I'm always gonna watch news. I'm always gonna read stuff. But we can't lie that Donald Trump wasn't entertaining and fun, and sometimes was a welcome distraction from what was happening with COVID. Of course, we know that his position is dangerous because he actually has power, and for that reason, I mean, right now they're stopping a $2,000 stimulus bill from going through the Senate, which means ordinary people don't get that relief they need right now. So I'm not making light of it, but it is interesting. One thing I've seen on Twitter actually trending, I think a few days ago, was people tweeting President Harris or there's a show called I think it's called Goodbye 2020, something like that. Or no,
Death is 2020.
That's the one on Spotify. Sorry, on Netflix.
Wow.
What's interesting is there's a little scene where they talk about people waking up in a kind of dystopian future, if you like, and they were talking about President Harris, and I just thought to myself, it is true that yes, Trump's inauguration, Trump's inauguration, he would love that. Biden's inauguration, I'm looking forward to, right? But I'm also really scared because Biden literally looks like he's 2 sneezes away from calling it a day, right? So my fear is that he, gets it. And so some of my friends said, "Oh, the next 4 years of Biden," and I thought, "Oh, well, I'm not sure if we'll get 4 years. If I'm honest with you, because who knows? Do you think it's going to last 4 years?"
I don't think he will, and I'm trying not to think about it because Kamala Harris is quite scary to think about as president, given that she's the kind of liberal that does more damage than good sometimes. Because at least with Trump, we know the crap that he brings to the table, and we can kind of manage around it. Whereas with Kamala Harris, she was a cop. She has this very, and as you know, I'm quite anti-police. That she has this kind of.
What do you mean? She was an attorney general.
Yeah, so she essentially is pro-cop. She's pro-police in that way, and her agenda, her pro-police agenda, for me is. This is what I mean by I'm not a massive fan of Biden and Harris as a they're better than Trump, but I don't.
Hold on. Just to push back on this. So she's pro-police. What does that mean? Like she's pro-law and order? What do you mean?
Mike, we're not going to get into an abolitionist argument today because we do this every time we have a conversation. But I do feel like
no. I'm only asking. Bear in mind, I'm asking this not just for myself, but also for people who are listening who might hear Coppola or whatever you said, and they're like, "What does that mean?"
So there's actually a really good article that I wrote for TCS about this. So you can have a look. I think I published it straight after the.
Sorry. Her being pro-cop.
Her being pro-police, yeah. Her being the issues with Biden and Harris together, and there were a lot of policies that came into being when Biden came in. When Biden was with Obama, that were kind of like swept under the carpet. That I think we maybe need to address better. And maybe you're right in that, because it's not. With Trump, we're all watching the news a bit more. We're kind of reading it a bit more because we're excited to see what he's going to do next. So maybe we're paying more attention to all the stuff that he's done. Whereas with Obama, perhaps we didn't do the same, and perhaps same with Biden and Kamala Harris, we won't do the same. But I feel like Kamala is I'm very anti-police. I don't agree in the police as an institution. I take an abolitionist standpoint rather than reformist. So I think that the police should not exist full stop anymore. Not right now. I think it's not going to be a day process. It's going to be a long process, and that's okay. And we start by defunding them. But I do not believe in the reform of police, which is in order to stop racist police, for example, you give them unconscious bias training or anti-racism training, because I believe the police as an institution is inherently at its core racist, and that's due to the policies that have existed in the past, due to the fact that anti-discrimination laws were not something the police were counted within. So I think that Kamala Harris is somebody that comes across as quite liberal, as quite left, but actually and I can't speak for other policies because I haven't done that reading. But I know from where she stands on policing, and given the recent, the recent year we've had with America, with the US and George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it's a really important point for us to take notice of. The way that where people stand on policing, I think, is a really important stance to read upon.
That's really interesting, because it's always struck me as quite interesting, because obviously no one's ever won policy. I don't, or one with the Kamala Harris one. I find it odd, because what I'm trying to ascertain is when people have a problem with her, right? Is it because she was the attorney general, and is that the issue? When people say she's pro-police, do they mean because what policy or what about her is like, I support the police, and then when people will say that, I'm asking all this because I'm saying, is the issue that she's not an abolitionist? And in that way, are you saying you only support politicians that are abolitionists? If that's the case, you literally have like 5 politicians to support.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that I don't, they're not my, that's what I'm saying by like, they're better than Trump, but they also have issues. So I don't support them massively, but I support them better than I support Trump. And if I was an American citizen and were able to vote, I would have voted for Harris and Biden, because actually I need, do you know what I mean? Like, it's the same with the abolitionists. For me, we're not going to get rid of the police straight away tomorrow. It's a process. And I think in order for us to get from here to abolition, like we need Harris and Biden first, and then we need someone more left than them. And then we need some more left than them, and some more left than them, until we can get to a place where we can say the word abolition.
You think America, just generally speaking, do you think America wants that? Because most Americans are bang in the center.
I feel
you just narrated an extreme left view of America, and I just wonder. I'm not saying whether you want to or not is bad, but I just wonder if you think America wants what you're saying. This is what I always want to ask this to, like, abolitionists on CNN. When I see people on CNN, I just want to pause. Like, oh, no. Do you think Americans want what you're suggesting?
I don't think a lot of white Americans want that, but I think given the last year that we've had, the fact that oh my God, what's the state? Minneapolis? Minnesota, Minneapolis. It's Minneapolis, right?
Where
George Floyd, Minneapolis. So the fact that that state has already begun that process of defunding the police, you know, off the back of the Black Lives Matter movement, is just, and that's not all of America. And maybe it's a particular faction of the state that has pushed for that, but actually there is appetite for it. We're seeing the word abolition thrown about more in this past year than I have done since reading, you know, bell hooks and other Black theorists way back when. So I'm really excited by all the theory that's coming out and all the conversation around the difference between defunding abolitionist and reformist theories. And I'm hoping that education will help us all to understand, okay, you know, in America, the police have a very specific and very quite interesting backstory, in that they actually were there to protect slaves. In the UK, it's a very slightly different process, but we did borrow a lot of the policies from the US when we became here. So I feel like once we learn about that history, once we learn about the processes in which they exist, the processes in which we can get rid of them, I think we'll be able to move towards I don't want to say more left, but I want to say an anti-police.
That's what it is.
I don't know. I'm radically left in the fact that I don't think that I'm left. I just think I'm normal. Like, I'm just like, why do you not? I don't understand why you support the police. Like, that's just, you're either abolitionist or you're a policeman, and that's it. There's no other in my mind. But, you know, coming back to Kamala Harris, like, she called herself a top cop. She calls herself a cop. She calls herself as, like, you know, serving for the state, serving for as Attorney General is her being like a top cop. So she likes that idea of being a policeman. She likes that idea, and that's kind of, I don't like. It feels a bit like, not a massive fan of that, because I feel like there's a lot of liberals that I'm. See that?
Sorry, you're finishing. No, sorry, I want you to finish. Sorry.
So there's a lot of liberals that take on a position where they feel quite left, and you feel like, okay, you can have a conversation with them, but actually their background is they're really pro-police, and they are, you know, really into the institutions, and they're really
it's odd to me. What's odd to me is the seeming juxtaposition you're making between being left wing and like being pro-police as you've dubbed it. I'm not sure they're quite as antithetical as you think they are. So you've said that people think they're left, but they're actually pro-police. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the continuum. It's not, to be left wing doesn't mean to not believe in the police or to not believe in law and order.
I don't think it's law and order that I have an issue with as such. It's the police as an institution that I have an issue with more so. I think law and order is like a consequence, right? So you have like police as an institution that existed, and then you had like the law and everything else that was built around it and built to protect it, so they all serve each other. So in order for us to take the police down, you have to take a lot of it down and actually rethink it. And I don't mean get rid of it and have nothing. Hold on. I don't mean get rid of it and have nothing. I mean get rid of it and actually really think about, what is it that we need? What is it that's actually serving the people of the US or the people of the UK right this very moment? Because actually the people that the police used to serve in the UK back in the 1800s is different from the people that exist right now, you know, in that we're not all white. And the fact that, you know, you couldn't bring a discrimination lawsuit against the police until the early 2000s because they just weren't included in the racial discrimination laws, even though it was repealed 3 times and redone. That just goes to show that there was no consideration for non-white people being British citizens. And that for me is a really interesting story. I think we all need to know, really. We all need to pay attention to.
I definitely think we need to give, and we will do it on this platform, like give like voice to the abolitionist movement, but also folks who don't believe in abolition, so we can have a conversation about both, right? I think that's important, because what I don't subscribe to and where I kind of pack up my bag, because I'm open, I love ideas, I love hearing people kind of say, we should have this, reform society this way, love it. But where I pack up my bag and go, I'm okay, is when folks attach a kind of moral virtue to their belief, and like they're kind of, so I know people who are like, how could you not be abolitionist? If you're not abolitionist, then you believe in the structural oppression of, and you're like, hold on now.
Well, I don't see what the problem is. I don't see why that's an issue.
I can say why I think it's an issue. It's one thing to say that the police, like every other institution, is not perfect. That there's nothing wrong with saying that, right? And I think most people would probably admit that this institution isn't perfect. And then what happens in the marketplace of ideas is we go back and forth on how we have a more equitable, perfect, whatever you want to call it, right? So some people think we need to have more black police officers, right? Some people think we need to have police tactics change, and some people think we need more community policing to augment there's all these different ideas, but to go, doesn't matter, this is the only way we're going to do it. And everyone who doesn't believe that, hold on. This is the only way to do it, which is fine. But then to go, and everyone who doesn't believe that is a bad person. That's where I go, well, no, quite frankly.
I don't think I wouldn't call somebody bad. I just told them they were wrong, right? And when you say it's perfect and imperfect, okay. An example of a cake, right? An imperfect cake is, I made a cake and the top of it burnt, so I sliced it up and I put icing on it. And I put sprinkles on it to hide the burnt stuff. And that's what reformist does, right? Makes it look pretty. It's a good cake, but really it has that burnt undertone to it. And that, it wasn't done well. The police at the moment, for me, is like where you have a cake and you use out-of-date eggs, which are rotten. You use the flour that really, is clumped together and a bit nasty. You use, I don't know, not sugar. You put like syrup in because you can't find sugar. That kind of cake, and you build it up. It doesn't rise. It's really flat. And you kind of go, oh, let's just stick some sprinkles on it. And there you go. That's a cake. That for me is, in order for us to reform the police, we need to take it down. We need to really go into the ingredients, and we need to switch out the ingredients. And for me, the ingredients are the police as an institution. And I think we need, and I understand that law and order is really important. Yeah,
I get your point. I find the cake, because the issue is when people use examples like cake when they're explaining something, right? Me with my 2-year-old mind, I'm just thinking of all the cutbacks. Like I'm like, well, what kind of flour did they use? Maybe if you added some yeast, then it would rise. Yeah, but I get your point. Overall, you're saying that institutionally the cake is too far gone. Yeah. It can't be saved. And therefore, you need a new cake. That's okay, right? I would say you're wrong in that assessment, but obviously, this is a special episode, and like I said, I think we ought to dedicate proper time to like the abolitionist arguments and movements. I would be really interested to hear more about it. But speaking of old white people, like Joe Biden, the Queen actually turns 95 this year.
Yeah.
In April the 11th, I believe. It's April the 21st. She's going to be turning 95. She's already the longest reigning monarch in British history. What are your thoughts on the Queen's birthday this year? Are you excited for that? If you're an abolitionist, I imagine that's another institution you want to abolish.
I think the Queen's doing really well for her age right now. She's.
Hold on, don't tell me. Are you a royalist?
No, I'm not a royalist like that. No.
That would be really odd if you're like, destroy the police, but the royal family.
They're people. I mean, at the end of the day, they're people, right? So they're people. Like, there's nothing more to it. I don't know what the conversation is about. I think, for me, the institution is not just one thing. It's about the whole thing together. So
that's so interesting because take the royal family that institutionally was problematic in the past. There's been so much that's changed over time with that institution being reformed, as it were. So we saw the Commonwealth Games and the fact that now you see people who are, they play tennis, they play football, and they're celebrating, if you like, being part of the Commonwealth, right? You see all the work they do around the world. Some people will say that's an institution that's kind of been reformed over the years and it's matured. And I think watching The Crown, I never thought I'd be quoting The Crown, but I do remember someone saying that one of the major ways that the royal family has been successful is by continually reforming, so as to speak to the issues of the time and stuff like that. But that's an institution that perhaps went through a successful rebrand. One thing I know people are missing is obviously events. I know people are missing events big time. Now, to this year, we're meant to have the Tokyo Olympics, and we're meant to have what I know a lot of people in the UK care about. I've never really understood it myself, is the Eurovision Song Contest. Right? Are you excited for these two things coming back?
I'm not a massive fan of Eurovision. I don't really watch it. And then
what? Neither do I. But yeah.
And then when it comes to the Olympics, like, I don't know, it will be on in the background when I'm working, but I don't necessarily like,
Well, shouldn't we abolish it? Because it's a flawed system, isn't it?
Expand on that further.
No, I'm joking.
I see what you're saying. Like, I don't think anything old is.
No. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But feel free to make your point, anyways.
I don't think anything old is wrong. I don't think that's not my standpoint. My standpoint is that when you have something that is a combination of being old and being doesn't work, and the people that it serves is no longer the people that are there right now. Take ballet, for example, right? Ballet as an institution, as a dance, is the shoes, for example, were designed and invented in the 1800s. And since then, there's been no progression in it. And that's because like people that are purists in terms of like ballet and dance will be like, no, the shoe needs to be exactly how it needs to be from the 1800s in order for it to be proper ballet. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You can't do ballet in trainers. What is that? You can't wear ballet in trackies. You need to wear a leotard and leggings. And what that meant is that you then had black women, for example, that couldn't find shoes to match their skin tone. So they literally had to paint them by hand or put foundation in them or dye them or wear pink shoes or white shoes that were made for white women rather than being able to wear something that match their skin tone. That for me is an institution that needs to be reformed, right? Because actually the core of it is, I understand the essence of it. The essence doesn't start from racism. It wasn't racist in its initial stand-up. It's elitist in that it's only a particular kind of person. The price marker for people that can study ballet, get into ballet, or even like watch ballet is way too high for the normal person. Same with opera. But I think that the institution itself isn't at its core racist. The class issue is another thing that we can talk about and we can discuss. And you have newer versions of contemporary dance that mix ballet and hip hop, for example, together, which is great and amazing, or ballet and Afrobeats together, which again is really cool. Because then it's like actually you're merging into these different like fusion ways of dancing, which the purist ballet, old will say this is wrong. So I think that ballet as an institution, as an industry, needs to be reformed in order to adapt and allow for a more diverse audience, because that's who we are right now. The people that are doing ballet are young Black and Asian people. The people that are watching ballet or want to watch ballet may not have the same money as the rich white old people. So you need to change those price points. You need to be able to allow for a newer audience. Maybe it needs to go online, maybe it needs to be more immersive. How do you make it so, and that's what I mean by adapting. So that's a really old institution. The shoes were invented from 1800 and we still haven't changed them, but it's still something that can be reformed.
I'm being so tempted to get into the mud with some of these topics but it's meant to be a light episode, so I'm trying my hardest because it's a holiday special, this one, isn't it? So I'm trying my hardest to keep it light. I take your point. I absolutely do. Of course, there's so many rebuttals I would send your way, and perhaps again that's another conversation we ought to have about these industries and reform versus abolishing. And I think there's really interesting points to be made about how we go about reforming these institutions. Do they need to be reformed at all? Of course, there'll be people who have different views to you. But I take your point. I can't wait for big events. I know I was listening to James Blunt the other day talking about he's actually so confident that we're gonna have herd immunity that he's added more dates to his tour, which I think is I think it's around June that his tour is kicking off. So he's saying that we'll be fine by June. The Tokyo Olympics is meant to be, I believe, in April. I might be wrong about that, but they're saying it's going to look very different to July rather. They're saying it's going to look very different to obviously previous Olympic Games, but again, they're quite confident it's going to happen as well. Which brings me largely to what's the big hope for this year, I guess, which is that we may go back, whether it's going back or setting a new standard to some sort of normalcy where we can have these big events, where we can have movies out again. I know this year Tom Cruise is going to space. He's working with NASA and Elon Musk's SpaceX to go to space and shoot a film from there. He's got a new film, Top Gun, coming out as well. I mean, people just want to go back to being able to go hug their friends, whatever. So I don't know. Do you think that's going to happen this year? Do you think we're going to be able to go back to some sort of normalcy before the end of the year?
I'm going to use a phrase that I've hated, but is actually perfect for the situation. It's going to be a new normal. I think the way that we've done it.
That's one of the phrases like unprecedented, right?
I hate it, absolutely hate it. I watched a TV show that was like from 2016, 2017, and it said something like, "Oh, there's lockdown," and I was like, or somebody said, "Oh, I'm being quarantined." I'm like, "No, you're not. That's not quarantine, honey. That's not what it is. Okay, you're not lockdown.
Nothing yet.
You are not isolated. Okay, you're not isolated in your house." But I think there's things that we've learned, right, and things that we've taken from the current climate. You know, Zoom, for example, being able to do this and not have to travel. So that's one benefit I think that we'll take forward. I love music concerts. I love being able to go dancing. I love being able to see people. So I'm really missing that, and I love getting on a plane and I don't know, just going places. I'm really hoping that comes back, but I also understand that the virus, the policies to stop it spread, to stop people dying needs to take its course, and that's fine. Yeah. And if it means that I can't travel until 2022, or I can't do the things that I want to do until 2022, I'll find other ways of doing them. If I can't go to a concert, I can almost guarantee you that in another 5 years time, not even 5 years, 5 months time, sorry, they'll build there's a VR app, for example, on your phone that you can watch stuff, and it's almost like really immersive. There'll be a new tech. Apple will probably release a new headphone or something that will then,
Apple will sort it out.
Honestly, there'll be like a little booth that you can stick in your house, and you'll be able to feel like someone's beer being thrown on your face this side, someone's sweat on this side, someone throwing you into the mosh pit. It's gonna be great.
4D experience.
Even like a 60 experience, right?
All right. Well, that's
already.
It's funny you should say that because obviously we've seen the kind of advent of 5G. I should be careful because probably going to trigger all these conspiracy theorists, right? But apparently China's already working on 6G, which apparently there's reports that will be rolled out this year, which will allow for stuff like holograms, and AR, augmented reality, to become kind of widely used. So we'll be interested to see what happens there. Well, listen, this year.
Here's a hypothetical, right? If for all the conspiracy theorists out there, if 6G turns out to be the thing that causes coronavirus, but it's also the thing that allows you to do holograms and like 6D or 5D or whatever it is, and be able to like virtually feel someone as we
you do know you can't have 6D, right? These dimensions, but carry on.
But whatever it is, 4D, 5D, 6D, I don't know. I'm in tier 4. My brain is not working. Would you take it? Would you be okay with 6G then? Because actually, even though it causes coronavirus, it's also solving the current coronavirus issue that we have now by being allowed, by stopping people from being isolated. Just a hypothetical.
I think it's a good question, and folks can get involved with the hashtag LTCS online. You can let us know, or even in the comment section. Would you do that? Would you take the vaccine? Even I know we've talked about that quite a bit. There's no doubt that this year we've got all sorts of interesting news stories we're going to be covering, and my hope is that this podcast can follow you along the journey. We've got lots of interesting guests every single week. We're talking about the week's news, talking about interesting topics. I want to give more space to some of the things you've mentioned today, Afshan. Stuff like the abolitionist movement and even the royal family. Like I want to talk about some of these really interesting things, and I hope that folks would subscribe. So if you're listening to this now, if you're joining us on YouTube, where we have a visual or video version of this podcast, then do subscribe, turn your notifications, follow us on Spotify, be a part of what's going to be a really exciting year for this podcast. Thank you if you've been listening so far, and do share this with a friend, make their day, and share this podcast. Afshan, any final words?
Buy my book and the book event in a box. Oh wow! You take me off as I said that. Buy my book. It's called RE Desire. You can find it on my website, www.afshandl.com. And the links are all on my Twitter as well, which is @AfshanDL. And if you're really nice to me, DM me, I might give you a discount. to the book, or you might get a really nice signed copy with a beautiful wax seal in the letter. So yeah, do that, man. Support your artists like you support your rappers.
I didn't mean to do that. I'm still figuring out how to do this whole visual thing.
Fine. As soon as I said promote my book, you went, no, Afshan, fine, and then close me off. It's all right. No, just silence all the women everywhere. It's fine.
Folks, I'm very sorry. But yeah, no, this has been great. And until next week, have a really great week. Take care, folks.
Bye.